Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Starch is the way to go. Yeah. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon, joined by the Ruckettes. Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abahaka, Urban League CEO and President Gwen Grant, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran, and lobbyist Woody Cozad with the Cozad Company. I realize many of you think we talk about clowns every week when we discuss local and area politics, but this week there's no doubt we're discussing a clown. At the opening of the Missouri State Fair in Sedalia, a rodeo clown appeared in the arena wearing a mask of President Obama. The rodeo announcer asked if the crowd would like to see a bull run the president down or the mask of the president down, and the crowd cheered. The incident triggered a national debate about free speech, racism, and the nature of Missourians. Local columnist Louis Duguid claims the incident revealed a lot about Missouri's antebellum past and its inability to see the nation's first African-American president as other than minstrel show entertainment. Woody, you're a native Missourian, as am I, and you know a lot of people around the state. What do you think of Mr. Duguid's conclusions?
Well, actually, I was born in Maine and reared by a woman who grew up in Maine. But nonetheless, I claim to know a little about Missourians, and I'll tell you 55% of them think the president's doing a bad job. 37% think he's doing a good job. That's not a very good ratio. That is not based on his race. That's based on their conclusion that he isn't doing a very good job. These masks, which we have suddenly described as minstrel show mask or a blackface mask, are in fact presidential masks. They go back, in my memory, at least as far as Richard Nixon. And let me tell you, the folks who mostly attend the state fair are mostly in that 55%, and they would have done the same thing, and may very well have done the same thing, for Jimmy Carter, say, in 1979 or 80. This, I don't think, is racism. Vulgar, not very funny, yeah, all of the above. Not very respectful of the presidency. Well, gee, welcome to America in the 21st century. Come to think of it, welcome to America back when George Washington was in office and his own Secretary of State was running an underground newspaper attacking his administration. Just nothing new here, folks. And it is done at a function sponsored. A Missouri State Fair is in part funded with public money. That raises a question.
You bet.
But it only raises a question because we also fund the University of Missouri. And if somebody puts on a Bush mask and goes out and has a demonstration at the university on class time or something, are we going to tell them they can't do that?
But the use of state money at state fairs where presidents have been kidded in the past never raised a question previously.
Well, there isn't any record of any president being kidded at that particular event.
I think there is. I think it's done every year. At least that's what we've been told.
I looked for one, didn't find it. No, there isn't. And you know, most everybody understands what that was about.
What was it about?
It was about making fun of the president and really putting that figure out there. If you listen to the words that went with it, I was more shocked, not so much by the mask, as by the words of the announcer and we're going to come out and get you, and look at the president, look at Obama, never using his title, of course. Look at Obama. He's gonna run away. And by the way, I grew up in rodeo country. I've been to a lot of rodeos, and those kinds of events, the guys that are clowns are athletes. And the rodeos I attended were full of class and style. And I never saw anything like that about a president. And I'll tell you what, that looked like a tacky operation. It really did.
Do people need to be fired over this, as one rodeo clown has been banned from Missouri state fairs forevermore, and the president of the Rodeo Association has resigned, and he's also the superintendent of the Boonville School District, may be in problems there?
Should they be fired? I think that's the call of the folks in authority.
Well, is that not an overreaction?
I don't think it's an overreaction, because I think that in this particular case, we're talking about using public dollars. We talk about it's not the joking about the president that's at issue here. There was a great article in the Star this morning about how for years comedians have joked about presidents. It's the manner in which it's done. Is where they've imitated presidents. They do it on Saturday Night Live all the time. They come out and they're in caricature, they're in form. But it's not in a disrespectful manner. It's not in a manner that demeans the office of the president. I think that's what's at issue here. And then to have a superintendent of a school district involved in this at a family event where there are young people setting a poor example for children, I think should be addressed.
Well, Mike, I spent a lot of time Sunday writing about this and then subsequently following up on it. And I would agree to this extent with the "this isn't a big deal" crowd. Oh, okay. Similar things have happened very sporadically. I mean, the conservative crowd that's been trolling my pieces this week said, "It happened in 1994. Here's this link." And I mean, everybody, Dana Loesch, all these super conservatives are pointing to the 1994 incident when a Bush thing, similar incident, occurred. 19 years
the
ago.
Missouri State?
No, this is in Pennsylvania.
But
Okay,
it's
so
not uncommon at rodeo events.
it's not uncommon to make fun of some things, but I mean, which brings to the larger point, which is, yeah, it is different because he's black. Can we acknowledge that? It is different because he's black. And, you know, 4 of the 5 people sitting around the table are white, and we don't really recognize it. But if you have somebody out there at a basically all-white crowd in a rural crowd where they don't like Obama anyway, going fiddling with his lips, yes, mocking the president, it is going to be taken differently certainly by black people, but also by, the liberal people who don't want Obama made fun of in that way. So I think there is a overreaction probably by both sides in that regard, but I think my overreaction was right.
All right. Something good had to happen sooner or later at the Bannister Mall. Thank you. Kansas City-based Cerner Corporation is buying 217 acres of the mall to expand its innovation campus. The expansion could add thousands of jobs, perhaps as many as 15,000, to an area where economic development has been tepid at best. The Business Journal quotes Cerner as saying the purchase is contingent in part on the securing of appropriate financial incentives. Where might those incentives come from, Yale?
Gosh, they'll probably come from the city, the state, and your right pocket. You know, they already have a deal out there that basically it's a nice TIF district, tax increment financing. And let's give credit where it's due, which is Cerner and their crowd has bought property out there. I mean, they've actually put it all together, most of it, the land together. And if you step back and take a snapshot of 10 years from now, and they've actually built some or many of the buildings, and there are 6,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 people working out there, and there is some retail starting to pop up. And to me, almost most importantly, some of the neighborhoods around there are rejuvenating because people go, I want to live close to work, and I'll buy this rundown home, and it suddenly improves in, right now, a pretty dilapidated area of Kansas City. That's all good. So, I mean, that would actually be one of those things where, as anti-incentive as I can certainly be sometimes, this is not a border war issue. Cerner's creating jobs over in Kansas. They've got jobs right across the street in Missouri. It is going to be a tax giveaway, but nothing's going to happen there until you give some of this stuff away. So Cerner is, a legitimate Kansas City company. They've certainly invested in our area, which is good. It's not, again, an outsider coming in and saying, hey, you're picking the poke. They have developed jobs before. So I think in general right now it's all good. Bottom line, you keep an eye on how much incentives you give away, which is always a deal.
But you wouldn't get that area developed without substantial
No, I
incentives,
agree. And they were going to give them to Bass Pro. They were going to give them to whatever, when the soccer park was going to come in there. So, yes, downtown and South Kansas City on that area, you're going to have some incentives.
Hey, would somebody just explain briefly, because I bet a lot of people don't know. They hear Cerner talked about, and we're lucky to have Cerner in Kansas City. But what does it do?
Oh, they're just great. And they're more than just a good company. They are a great company.
Well, what do they do?
And they are booming. Well, their specialty,
what's their business?
Their specialty is adapting the needs of health care institutions to the digital age. They invent and market healthcare information software for the most part.
Not just here, but around the world.
Oh, and with Obamacare coming on, Cerner and other health changes in our culture and society, their future is just really incredible. This is a classic case where tax support from the people is really a good idea. But for, this is the classic but for. If it weren't for the incentives, it probably wouldn't happen. In addition to that, I think people need to really, I hope that the public officials in Kansas City will think about why the last big development didn't work there. You know, we had a huge, we got the mall and all the kinds of box stores, and my gosh, Walmart had something that was the biggest thing I ever saw out there. Where did it go and why?
Crime.
One of the big ones.
That was one of the problems at
That's one
Bannister
of the
Mall.
problems, but the
One of
other
the big
problem was a
ones,
lot more
but
retail
failure
developed,
to
Lee
develop
Summit and
the
other
area
places.
around
Yeah.
the mall
Yeah.
and the failure to do anything in addition to it.
Well, they had to build towers in the parking lot of the Bannister Mall
Yeah.
for protection purposes, and that, I
Well,
think,
that was
drove
stupid.
lots of people
but I mean,
away.
that was
Well,
stupid.
but
Well, it
there-
may have been stupid, but
No, it
that
didn't
was a
prevent
reaction.
crime.
Mistakes
It
all
just
around.
made it
Crime.
more dangerous. Yeah.
Wynn? Any thoughts about this Bannister Mall development?
I'm excited about it. I live in that area. It's not far from where I live, and would be delighted to see the development. I'd like to see the housing values go up because certainly I think it can just be a great developmental piece for the 6th District.
So thank God for Cerner, right?
Absolutely.
All right. All aboard for the downtown starter streetcar system. The Missouri Court of Appeals ruled against 2 property owners in the special taxing district who claimed the tax was unconstitutional. Now, there's still the chance of another appeal, but it looks increasingly likely that the starter system will, in fact, start. So what do the people behind this plan hope will happen once the line is up and running from River Market to Union Station? Gwen?
Well, I think they hope that it will spur development. I think they hope that they will be able to tap into additional federal dollars so that they can extend east and west and further south.
They've already started these
They've started
ideas, haven't they, about moving?
some groups, some planning,
Expanding.
and to talk about how they will extend the streetcar. I think the biggest challenge will be, in order to do this, you've got to have federal support. You've got to have federal dollars, and we currently, with sequestration and with a dysfunctional Congress, it's highly likely that those things won't happen. So I think we're a long way from extensions, and it'll be great to see us get it started, and hopefully it will spur some development along the pathway and support tourism in the
Well, there
area.
may be some issues with the contract to manage the project, Woody. We've got 2 out-of-town, 2 non-union companies that have been selected. Herzog Contracting from St. Joseph, Stacy and Whitbeck from California. What are the issues that those raise?
Well, they're non-union. That's the issue. And look, Herzog is virtually a local company. They're in St. Joe. I know that they have been helpful to I have been told they have been helpful to the city and to Mike Sanders just with free advice as on the heavy rail and light rail. They are among the most qualified companies in America to do this kind of work. They do a lot of it. They've done it in San Diego. They've done it in Miami. They've done it all over the country. So here they are right next to home, and they are highly qualified and among the most qualified in the country to do it. The city staff has therefore appropriately said, yeah, they ought to be on this list. And now we're getting grousing that we've got other companies located right here in Kansas City. Clarkson has partnered up with a company that does have experience in rail, Kiewit. J.E. Dunn's mostly a building construction company. Really, is this what the city council is there for? I mean, this is what you got a city staff for, to pick who gets this contract and who's qualified to get it. Now, this is pure politics. They're a non-union company. We don't want them around here. Get them out of here. You want to get some federal money out of that dysfunctional Congress, you do this on this basis. Say, we're not going to hire that non-union company to do it. You can kiss that federal money goodbye for a long
But
time.
if I understand correctly, it may be a non-union company, but it's done work with union laborers in the past and put together agreements with local labor unions.
Yep.
Okay, well, a couple things. One, yeah, I mean, Woody, I know you say incorrectly so, politics could get involved here. Well, they do in big contracts, and that's kind of the way of the game. But obviously, it's now it's an oversight issue where the public will see if they make a change here, we'll know why. Now, it wasn't done behind the scenes in the bidding process. At least the staff recommendations made, it was accepted by the group that's overseeing the project. So at least we're to that point. So if the council for some reason makes a change, we'll know why. And that, eventually they have to approve something. The second point is, you know, I know that we got all the pro-transit people out there, and they go crazy whenever I mention this, but yes, transit in Kansas City could be good for development, and that's why I support the starter line. But all this stuff about, oh, we need to start talking about expansion, we need to get going on that. Well, no, I'm glad you're talking about it, but until you put 2 miles in and you can find some people who really will ride the thing, it's already going to be free. I mean, they got to make it free just for people to ride the thing. So it's not a big transit issue in Kansas City. It is a development issue.
People will
now,
ride the
eventually,
thing.
it could become a transit issue if their dream of having 8, 10, 12 miles succeeds. And I you know, applaud the enthusiasm for doing that. But if we start having more TTDs or more special sales tax districts before you even know the first one's going to work, that is a wrong way to
And
go.
I think, aren't they spending about 1.9 million on planning extensions? Is that what the
Yeah, they're
article-
spending money. I don't know if
Right.
it's
Oh,
that much.
yeah. It's a hefty planning grant. I
Well,
guess.
Gail,
it's a
I'll bet
grant.
you ride it every day. I'll bet you'll be down there on that train.
Well, we're paying a lot for it at the Star, so I guess I should.
It's about time.
Property tax, it's a sales tax.
But is this possibly the kind of thing that you'll write a couple of times because it's new and it's a novelty, and then after that you go, well, this takes
Not
too
if you
long.
work or live
If
downtown.
you live and work down there,
Exactly.
I think you'll ride it frequently.
Yeah, you could.
Absolutely.
Because you can jump on, go down, have lunch, get back to work.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned there's still the possibility of an appeal to the state Supreme Court by the plaintiffs in this case. Do you think that's going to be likely, or do you think it's too far gone by now?
Look, I haven't followed the appeal closely enough to know even what the grounds are for the appeal. The only appeal I've ever thought had any chance of succeeding was the claim that they'd laid one TTD on another and that violated state law. I don't even know if this appeal contains that
It
allegation.
does. It did earlier, and there's already one in Belton that does the same thing. Now that maybe they're going to
Doesn't
throw the
answer the
Belton one out
question.
too.
I mean, I think the appeals court said you got into this too late. Your complaint was
Yeah.
filed after this was all
Right, it was
handled,
all
and you should have gotten
explained.
in
I mean,
earlier.
we did have million stories.
And
from
then
the
your
guy
problem
Boner
is if you
doing
want
it.
to do another TTD, they don't wait till too late. The next plaintiff will file on time, but that one may not be laid on top of an existing
Well,
one.
they
so you
have
may not
until the
that problem.
29th, and so then we'll know.
All right. If you think you're paying too many taxes, this next story may not make you feel better, although good health is the goal. A half-cent sales tax question for Jackson County may be on the November ballot. The 20-year tax would finance medical research at Children's Mercy, St. Luke's, and UMKC. The goal is to attract top researchers who would further Kansas City as a major life science center and advance translational research defined as ways to turn medical research into drugs, procedures, and devices that help patients. Jackson County Executive Mike Sanders is backing the plan, part of the Big Five agenda outlined by the Greater Kansas City Chamber. With the backing of both political and civic heavyweights, is this new tax on the glide path to success? Mary?
Well, I hope it's not on any glide path yet. I mean, what is it, a week, 10 days old about? The glide path is Sam Brownback language. I think we ought to stick to Missouri now for this
Is
question.
it on its way to being successful?
What we need with regard to this issue right now is for some opposition to come forward, because I hope that it's not on any glide path without really substantial, I mean substantial citizen dialogue and debate. This is a whopping big tax. This is a big deal in this town, and this is a $800 million transfer of wealth, if you want to put it that way, and it's private interests primarily that would benefit from a public tax. So it needs debate. And unfortunately, the deadline is August 29th that the county legislature is going to have to vote on this thing, and they weren't involved in putting it together. The people who might benefit from the institute, the Translational Medicine Institute, Kansas City Translational Medicine Institute, are the ones who put it together. Fine, that's just fine when you've got a year to consider it. Now, what are the issues? The issues are the following. Should UMKC, St. Luke's, and Children's Mercy Hospital receive $800 million over 20 years in sales tax revenue? And who will oversee it? Well, they've got plenty of overseers. It's complicated. There are 5 new, count them, 5 new boards. I don't necessarily oppose it yet because I'm just starting. Last night I got a Q&A from with someone working on the public relations for this project. But we need to debate this. And
UMKC is one of the recipients, and it's a public entity.
UMKC is, but each one of these institutes is currently engaged in in-depth research.
One of the questions that has arisen in the last couple of days is who will pay for the election? Some of the county legislators are saying the county shouldn't pay, and the Kansas City Star editorialized this morning that the public should pay.
Well, I'll roll through that very quickly, which is the public should pay.
Yeah.
It's a public election. I mean, the public almost always pays in Jackson County or Johnson County or almost anywhere. So that's to me, that's a small debate.
Okay, you raised other questions in your writing.
The civic leaders came in and talked to the editorial board, made a very nice presentation about here's what we're going to do. And we're going to spend the money on life-saving cures and improving medical treatment of patients. Nobody is against that. Let's start with that. But here's what I raised in the column today, and I continue to raise with the proponents of it, and I don't think it makes me an opponent yet, but it is, show me proof that you've spent some money in the past and done this. Children's Mercy supposedly spent tens of millions of bucks on translational research and all that stuff. I assume they've had 3, 5, 8, 10 patents out there where they've saved kids' lives, where they've come up with medicines that are doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why would I invest more money in something if I don't know what it's done already? That's my
Part of the
simple
idea, if I understand correctly, is to attract researchers to
Yes,
come
it is.
and live
Yes,
in
it is.
Kansas City.
Right.
And I would say there's no guarantee
But
that
it's
that can
not
happen.
necessarily life-saving cures. So we're talking here about translational medicine.
Yeah, let
which
me
is
get
unique.
Gwen in here
Yeah,
so she can have some time.
Let me say this. I want to say something about what Mary said earlier about the fact that there's not a public engagement process around this. There needs to be lots of public engagement because what I'm hearing in the community, you want us to do a half-cent sales tax for 20 years when folks in the urban community came forward with an idea of having an 1/8 of cent sales tax to revitalize the Prospect Corridor, which is crime-ridden, which has environmental issues, which is a public health problem. There was pushback from the same community, and so people are feeling disillusioned. People are feeling this is unfair. We need to have folks come in and have an opportunity to
Gwen's
engage.
point is so great because we need to ask the question. Sorry, wait just a second. What won't
You haven't
happen?
talked long enough on this.
Yeah, I know. I want to hear
What
from
won't
Woody.
happen if this does happen? That's
Okay,
another-
quickly, Woody.
Sorry.
Well, look, I don't like the idea for the obvious reasons on principle. The government's deciding that what we need to do is invest $20 million in a particular industry and it'll yield great benefits, and usually it doesn't develop. But let me say this, I'm glad Gwen said this because this surfaces the actual debate and the real problem on the county legislature, which is they got plans for sales tax increases for things they want to do, and they're afraid this is going to eat them up. And that debate is the one we need to have.
Okay, now it is time for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes commend or condemn people and events in the news, and we start with you.
Well, I'll have to roast City Council member Michael Brooks for getting involved in what he now acknowledges was an inappropriate relationship, some kind of sexting scandal, and we will now follow the paper trail to see whether it actually had any more involvement with public funds. But a very bad day for the council member.
I'd like to toast the National Council on Teacher Quality, which has done a study of American colleges of education. If you already had a fairly low opinion of those colleges, as I did, you'll be shocked to find that it's worse than you thought. And with that comes a roast for the University of Missouri, which actually went to court to conceal what it does in its College of Education from the National Council so that you and I won't know how they're doing at teacher education in our state university.
I want to toast the federal judge in New York who struck down the stop and frisk laws, which have resulted in racial profiling in New York, which has disproportionately impacted African Americans and Latinos who are simply walking in Manhattan and other areas in New York. And hopefully it will send a message across the nation that we need to address our criminal justice system to improve the disparities and inequities that exist.
I have a happy toast for a whole bunch of people, starting with Mayor Sly James, who appointed Mike Burke and Dr. Ray Daniels to the Mayor's Bi-State Innovation team a few months ago, and they collaborated with industry, Sprint and Google and others to develop something called the Digital Inclusion Fund, which was announced yesterday. It's a really positive thing. $1 million going into this fund, and it will go to really do something concrete for the 25%, believe it or not, of people in KCK and Kansas City, Missouri who don't have access to broadband. Real progress.
I enjoy listening to a broadband. And finally, a very sincere roast of Thomas Newhouse, a Shawnee resident who purposely drowned his cat in its carrier at Lake Waukomis while others watched, including children. The cat had apparently scratched and bitten Newhouse's fiancée. Some quirk of Missouri law made it impossible for prosecutor Eric Zond to bring any charges promoting a public outcry, as it should have. Says Zond, disappointed animal lovers should ask state legislators to modify the animal abuse law. I thank him for his efforts and certainly second his motion. And this fly seconds mine. And that is Ruckus for this week. We're off next week, back on the 29th. Now, on behalf of the Ruckettes and the Ruckus crew, I'm Mike Shannon. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.